Today I wanted to talk about 3 behaviors that empaths often engage in that wind up self-sabotaging their relationships. And it's so important because oftentimes we will spend a lot of time focusing on the red flags of the narcissist, how to spot a narcissist, why the narcissist does this or that, and we forget to take time to analyze our own behaviors that could possibly be attracting narcissists. So that's what we want to do today, and I have 3 ways that empaths often do that, so let's check them out. Okay, so once again, we're analyzing our own behaviors and looking for ways that we wind up self-sabotaging relationships. I've come up with 3 that I wanted to share today. The first thing that empaths often do that wind up sabotaging their relationships is we reveal too much too soon. Now, as empaths, we love close relationships. We love sharing, giving, and that includes of ourselves. The problem is that if we don't realize that we are with an emotional predator because possibly we're revealing things about ourselves too soon, this person could be filing away our information, our mistakes, our history, our scars that we're sharing with them, and they will use that as ammunition later on in the relationship. Now, that was something that I learned with my ex. Now, at the time, the narcissist did more listening than talking. In fact, I remember thinking at that time, he doesn't really have much to say. And yet I would excuse that behavior saying, well, you know, he's not trying to pry. He's just trying to be a good listener. What I didn't realize was that he was listening very intently and he was filing it away, kind of putting it in his pocket. And later throughout the years, he would take those wounds that I had shared with him out simply to hurt me. So one way that we can stop putting ourselves in that position to have our delicate past wounds reopened by somebody, by an emotional predator, is not revealing so much so soon. It feels good to be close to people, but the truth is we have to learn that a close relationship doesn't happen overnight. We need to learn to take things slower and take our time with what we reveal to the other person and watch how they take it. Watch how they respond, and do they reveal as well? And if they do reveal, we have to pay attention to how they reveal. We have to really be observant, not so ready to just give of ourselves, but rather give in tiny little bits and watch how it's taken and observe how we feel about it. For example, when I look back, whenever I did share of myself, it didn't really feel good. I was always left kind of confused with wondering, well, that conversation didn't really kind of make me feel good inside. Even though I tried to excuse it, my gut knew that it wasn't a good feeling. So pay attention to that. As you're sharing in little bits, learn to pay attention to how you feel. Learn to pay attention to your gut instinct. And that can help you to stop self-sabotaging relationships by falling for emotional predators. The second thing as empaths that we do that can often self-sabotage a relationship is our lack of boundaries. There's almost like it's something inside of us that tells us that saying no is a bad thing. The majority of us grew up with emotionally abusive parents or narcissistic parents. Whenever we exercised our boundaries, we were met with such negative responses that little by little, we stopped exercising our boundaries, and there were just blurry lines between boundaries and what was acceptable, what we were allowed to say no to and what we weren't. And then when we would say no, it was met with such guilt that exercising boundaries became something negative in our minds. The problem with that is when you're in a new relationship and you're with an emotional predator, they will test your boundaries in the beginning. They will see what you will tolerate, and if they can recognize that you have no boundaries, then they reel you in and you become acceptable prey to them. Whereas if you learn to accept your boundaries, it makes you more resistant to a narcissist, or actually you kind of repel them because they don't want somebody with boundaries. So learning that saying no is not a bad thing. It is not selfish. It doesn't make you a bad person because you can't say yes to everyone every single time. It means that you have healthy boundaries and that you recognize that you have limits. You're actually, when you're exercising boundaries and you're enforcing boundaries, you're recognizing your worth, your ability, because if you're doing too much, you recognize that that will be bad for you. So you become important in your own eyes, important enough to say no when you need to. And you don't have to feel guilty about it, because taking care of yourself is a priority. The third behavior I wanted to discuss, and probably to me one of the most self-sabotaging behaviors that as empaths we can engage in, and that's when we enter into covert contracts. And this is something that I had to really recognize that I did. And that's what a covert contract is that you come up with the contract in your mind. For example, well, if I just give him or her enough love, if I just do this, then they'll respond this way or that way. Well, that contract is in your mind, in your mind alone, or I should say it was in my mind. I thought, well, if I could just, continue to give unconditional love and forgiveness and kindness, it would rub off and he would in turn give me the love and kindness and forgiveness that I was giving to him. Well, that was not a verbal contract. That was a covert contract made up in my mind. It was something that in my mind, I figured if I did this, this would happen. And so I was constantly let down because I was giving and giving and giving and expecting something back, and I wasn't getting it because it was a one-sided contract. I was reaching that conclusion on my own. So as empaths, we really need to learn how to verbalize what we want in a relationship. It's not always easy for us, but it is extremely important. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves up to think that if we behave a certain way, a certain action will automatically come, and life doesn't happen that way. People are not mind readers. So we need to express what we need. We need to learn to be assertive in our relationships, expressing what makes us feel good, expressing what makes us feel uncomfortable. When we're able to do that, then we can really weed out unhealthy relationships, because if we have learned to express what makes us feel good and we recognize that the person we are with is unwilling to even recognize our needs, unwilling to care about what is important to us on an emotional level or not, then we can step back and say, okay, I expressed my needs. This person does not want to meet them. They're showing that they don't care about my needs. This is an unhealthy relationship, as opposed to not saying anything and just thinking that if we give and we give, the person will automatically give us back what we need. So do you see the difference? Learning to stop entering into covert contracts that exist only in our own mind will help us to learn to be more assertive and observant of whether or not this other person is willing to fulfill our wants and our needs. So those are 3 behaviors as empaths that we need to realize that we do, that we really need to modify. It doesn't mean we have to change who we are. I like being a giving person. I like sharing intimate things about myself. I like doing things for other people, and I like to give and make the other person happy. However, I have learned not to share too much too soon. I have learned to identify who is safe sharing my intimate details with and who isn't. I've learned that saying no is actually commanding respect from the other person, because you are respecting yourself enough to know your limits. And if the other person cannot respect you because you are placing a boundary, then they're really not someone that is healthy for you. And I've learned to be assertive with what I need. When I give, I also explain what I need as well. So it's not just giving, which as empaths we tend to fall into that rut. We are also learning to expect love back, expect kindness back, and explain that to the other person. Those three behaviors, when we modify them, they can help us to stop self-sabotaging our relationships, as well as falling into a relationship with somebody that could be an emotional predator.